So what do religious people make of abortion and family planning? What do religious texts say? What do religious teachings say? What do religious positions make of these issues? What about science? And what about health of people, especially women involved? How does this inform the attitudes of ordinary Africans as they grapple with these questions? So we have three speakers to address these issues from the medical scientific point of view. Dr. Rose Nanyonga is a very prominent medical personnel in Uganda. She did her studies at Yale. I met Dr. Nanyonga at Yale when she presented a lecture there, and it was fascinating just to listen to the lecture that she presented. And we are so pleased to have her. She received her undergraduate degree in nursing from Arkansas Technical University in 2002, where she was the all-valedictorian. It was a year and graduated also summa cum laude, which is a very high kind of honor that she attained. She earned Masters of Science in nursing from Biola University in 2005, and then went on to earn her PhD in nursing from Yale University, where she was also a Jonas Scholar. Again, a very high honor. Dr. Nanyonga may not like us to say it, but she is actually the nurse for the first family in Uganda, and she's also the Vice Chancellor for the International Christian University in Uganda also. So we are very pleased to have Dr. Rose Nanyonga to go first, and then the other speakers will follow suit in order with Dr. Saidat Liman, and then we have Elder Amos Kevin Annan also. So Auntie Rose, as I call you, over to you.
Thank you so much, John, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak today, and delighted to be in the company of outstanding scholars who are going to address this issue this afternoon. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. I was asked to address family planning and abortion from a medical perspective, but interestingly, as I looked at the literature and some of the experiences that we've had here in Uganda, I realized that it is integrated. So I'm going to talk about some of the barriers that stand in our way as medical providers to address this issue. And I'm using Uganda as a case study rather than the continent because I didn't have enough time to look at all the continent data. First, unintended pregnancies are common in Uganda, and they result in high levels of unplanned births, unsafe abortions, and long-term maternal complications, and of course, maternal mortality. More than 4 in 10 births are unplanned, according to the demographic survey of 2011, and these numbers have surely changed in the context of COVID, and I'll tell you why. In Uganda, an estimated 54 unsafe abortions per 1,000 women of reproductive age occur annually, and those data were from a report in 2014. Interestingly, well-intended COVID measures, public health measures, have spurred a spike in unintended pregnancies, especially for teenage girls, with rates jumping from 25%, which was already quite high in sub-Saharan Africa, to nearly 49% in some districts, meaning that many of those girls will probably not be able to go back to school. Relatedly, we have a high unmet need for contraceptive use, And although these rates doubled between 2000 and 2011, from 18% to 26%, they remain quite low at 38%. And this means that we are not able to match the rates of unintended pregnancies, which is a primary cause of unsafe abortions in the country. There are multiple barriers to either care or to access, and within the domains of political, social, moral factors, both at the individual level, at the family level, within the health services themselves, within the government, the rules and regulations that restrict, and the church as a powerful entity that influences policy when it comes to abortion and family planning. And I'm sure that my colleagues will address those ably. But let me talk a little bit about, barriers that exist among unmarried but sexually active young women. They cite being unmarried, which underscores the impact of morals and stigma surrounding sex outside of marriage. But there's also lack of access to family planning services and information, especially to women in the rural areas. And these data are quite split, where you have very low numbers, almost 18%, to nearly 39% in the urban areas. So access is low in general, but it's quite low among the rural women. We also have male partner influences, and I think this is true across the continent, with certain beliefs grounded in, either they believe family planning or contraceptive use is going to cause infertility, not just for the woman, but also for the male partner. They are likely to result in cancer. They are also apparently likely to increase extramarital affairs, because then women feel that, they can take risky behaviors without any consequences. At least that's what their male partners believe. So that is quite a barrier sometimes to family planning services. We have restrictive laws on abortion and morality, which limit care providers' response to abortion care needs, except those that are allowed in the post-abortion care, which is known as PAC here in Uganda. And comprehensive abortion care delivery is not included in a national response for maternal health care improvement. And I'm sure that this is also true for countries in other sub-Saharan Africa in the region. Some scholars argue that by prescribing maternity as we have prescribed it, or as we have defined it within the healthcare delivery system, along the continuum of birth, priority setting for investment and service delivery is therefore only directed towards interventions that promote women's normative role as mothers, while suppressing the unmet abortion care needs. So within the healthcare system itself, while we are open to look after the women as described within specific laws, we leave out the healthcare system is not responsive enough. We do not have safe spaces for young women who are at risk, who can come in and access care, and also actually be educated and sensitized on safe behaviors and safe practices, and so on and so forth. And this is actually true outside of the healthcare system. So I'm interested to hear what my colleague is going to talk about, the role of the church. How do we create those safe spaces? Because if the young women and women are not coming to the healthcare system, to the formalized healthcare system, they are definitely going to non-traditional approaches, including the church and other providers. And here in Uganda, that means that they are either using unskilled providers, including witch doctors and so on and so forth. So they will seek care where they can get it. The Ugandan government ratified its Maputo Protocol on the rights of women with reservation on reproductive health and abortion. So in cases of sexual assault, incest, rape, and when a pregnancy endangers a mother's mental and physical well-being. So abortion is allowed within those prescribed rules and regulations. However, within the medical facilities, inducing abortion, while allowed on medical grounds for the purposes of saving the life of a mother, law enforcement agencies continue to use a Penal Code Act, which is part of the laws of Uganda, which criminalizes the procurement of abortion and also what is known as aiding a woman to do so. But this definition by law enforcement also means that healthcare providers are hesitant to give any kind of care when it comes to a woman either seeking or has initiated the abortion. We have had during COVID, we had a conference where we had a data dissemination on teen pregnancies and abortion and family planning here in Uganda. And we had midwives giving testimonials of how they have been harassed by the police for having supported or aided a woman or reached out to offer some services to a woman who was in danger, having self-induced abortion on their own. So healthcare providers are sort of caught in that space where we have a duty to care, we have a duty to reach out to anybody who walks into the hospital, the clinic. However, if there are these restrictive laws and regulations and harassment, and intimidation, including arrests and convictions and imprisonment of both women and healthcare workers, then it becomes quite difficult to have a healthcare system that can have a high index to respond to the needs of these young girls and these women. And for that reason, women tend to seek care in unsafe environments and with unskilled providers, especially if the healthcare system is not responsive. But that also means that while medical facilities or providers fear arrests and harassment, they will turn the women away, and hence the care is limited. However, the self-induced and unsafe abortions result in long-term complications, including perforation, sepsis, and usually death for these women. So as healthcare providers, the discourse here is what is the right thing to do in the context of these prescribed approaches to how we should deal with abortion and how we should deal with family planning and support for women who are undergoing these challenges. Fewer opportunities for providers to interact with at-risk teens and women seeking help before decisions about abortion and usually unsafe are undertaken. So these rules and these regulations limit our ability to open up all the opportunities to engage the at-risk women. And also, this means that there are limited opportunities for these interactions and they result in fewer opportunities for family planning messages, which targets women at risk as well as teenagers. So you can see that these are really linked problems, that you cannot talk about abortion and family planning and medical services without actually looking at what are some of the structural barriers, the governance barriers, and entities that are setting the agenda in regards to abortion and family planning in all of these countries. Of course, we are using Uganda here as a case study. I wanted to put this here, knowing that my colleagues are going to address some of the religious factors. But I want to give you a startling statistic. In Uganda, 80% of Ugandans, are Christians with various faith-based institutions, and the church leadership exerts strong influences on family planning and on the abortion discourse. For example, policy reforms that have aimed at preventing maternal death due to unsafe abortions was so contentious that they were withdrawn in 2016, and we have not been able to revisit them. And so it's critically important to recognize this, that in the context of these very strong establishments, healthcare providers are sort of caught in that middle. And we also form part of that dialogue, because majority of us belong to the church, but at the same time, majority of us are in the healthcare system. And there's almost like a conflict of interest there. There needs to be some level of agreement and a unified agenda. And those are the considerations that I would like to leave here for our viewers today, for a continued dialogue in your own communities. There needs to be an enabling regulatory framework, a less restrictive regulatory framework properly interpreted by the street level bureaucrats, by the enforcers, by the police, to free healthcare providers to be able to provide care for those in need. But we need a unified strategic agenda, because Christianity influences and shapes what policy priorities are politically possible in some of our countries. So we need to bring the church leadership to the table. And this is one of the biggest idea that I contributed in the recent conference, because I said, how are we having a discussion about abortion, and how are we having a discussion about family planning without a single church leadership at the table? We need to bring them to the table, however uncomfortable the conversation is. So we need to open the door rather than closing that door, because they do influence policy, as we know, not just here in Uganda, but I am sure that this is reflective of what is happening in other countries. We need to have a high index response by providers, laws permitting, of course, to expand maternal services to include youth-friendly, safe, and accessible services for the young people. And as I mentioned, a collaborative and integrated approach. We need the church, we need the family, we need the government, we need the community, and we need the health system. So the conversation needs to happen within those domains, with all those stakeholders at the table. And health providers really need the support of all these entities to implement a responsive and context appropriate services in terms of abortion and family planning. And John, that's all I had to say tonight. I will welcome questions at the end of the talk. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so much, Mama Rose. Thank you so much for that succinct and clear presentation. And you've touched all the very, very key points. So you've set the stage, and you have turned it over now to the our religious scholars to speak to it. So we are going to invite our sister from Nigeria, who is also a very good friend of the Sani Institute, because she has visited and was part of our inaugural conference. Professor Saidatu Hassan Liman. Professor Saidatu Hassan Liman is a professor of Islamic Studies at Nasarawa State University in Kelfi in Nigeria. She's a former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics, immediate past Director of Research and Publications, and now he's a Deputy Director, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration of Nasarawa State University in Nigeria. Professor Liman is also a member of many women NGOs and president of the National Association of Women in Arabic and Islamic Studies. And we welcome Professor Saidatu. She will speak from the Islamic point of view, and then we come to our brother Kevin, who will speak from the Christian and the church's point of view. So over to you, Madam, and we give you 20 minutes.
Good afternoon or good evening, morning to all that are with us today. I'm very delighted to be in this program. From the Islamic perspective, I will start by saying that it is paramount to mention that in Islam, contraception is principally addressed only in the concept of marriage and family planning. Contraception is principally addressed in the context of marriage and family planning only. Now, as such, family planning in Islam refers to the use of contraceptive methods by a husband and a wife with mutual agreement between them to regulate their fertility with a view toward of health, social and economic health, and to enable the society. As a social system, culture and civilization, Islam considers the family the basic unit of any given society. The Quran, the primary source of Islamic law or Sharia, views marriage as sacred and identifies the husband and wife as the principles of family formation. The Quran has a number of references to marriage, including the following. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآية لقوم يتفكرون. What this means is that, and one of God's signs is that he has created for you mates from yourselves, that you may dwell in tranquility with them, and has ordained between you love and mercy. Now in another verse, the Quran also mentions, that is in Surah Al-A'raf, هو الذي خلقكم من أنفسكم واحدة وجعل منها زوجها لتسكنوا إليها. It is he who created you from single soul and therefrom did make his mate that he might dwell in tranquility with her. Now all these two verses are talking about the factor of tranquility when it comes to marriage. The third verse now added another factor, that is Wallahu ja'ala lakum min anfusikum azwajan wa ja'ala lakum min azwajikum banina wa hafadatan wa razaqakum min tayyibat. And God has made for you mates from yourselves and made for you out of children and grandchildren. So that is another factor. These are the two factors that are contained when it comes to the issue of marriage in Islam. These verses suggest that tranquility is an important purpose of family life and is achieved through marriage. Also, while procreation is expected in marriage to maintain the human race, sexual relations in marriage need not always be for the purpose of having less. It should support and endorse tranquility rather than disrupt it. Thus, contraception helps families achieve tranquility by having children when they want them and when they are prepared to have them. Thus, Islam will be sympathetic to family planning if spacing pregnancies and limiting their number made the mother more physically fit and the father more financially at ease, particularly since these actions do not violate any prohibition in the Quran or in the prophetic tradition, Sunnah. If excessive fertility leads to proven health risks for mothers and children, or economic hardship and embarrassment for the father, or the inability of parents to raise their children properly, Muslims will be allowed to regulate their fertility in such a way as to reduce these hardships. However, the rule is that such a choice should be voluntary with no coercion or law fixing the number of children per family. Now, the position of Islam on family planning. The reference sources of Sharia law as to permissibility, that is halal, or prohibition, or that is haram, are the Quran and tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. A thorough review of the Quran reveals no text prohibiting the prevention of pregnancy or diminution of the number of children, but there are several traditions of the Prophet that indicate its permissibility. This was accepted by the jurists of Islamic Sharia, while there is also the Sunnah, what can appear to be prohibiting. The majority jumhur of jurists in the legal schools, that is the mazahib, agree with the permissibility of al-azal. Al-azal is in English coitus interruptus, where the husband ejaculates outside of the woman. Now, the position of legal schools is that in his, as found in the book of Imam Al-Ghazali, Ihya Ulumuddin, he is a Shafi'i scholar, and he classified the earlier and contemporary opinions of his time into 4 groups. The first group is unconditional permission, that is of family planning. Secondly is permission if a wife consents, and prohibition if she does not. Third is permission with slaves, but not with free wives, and that is obsolete now. And then finally, unconditional prohibition. That means scholars are divided among these options that we have. Al-Ghazali then said the correct way to us in the Shafi'i school is that it is permitted. He then specified 5 acceptable reasons for preventing pregnancy, which include preservation of the wife's beauty and fitness, and protecting her life from the dangers of labor, and the need to avoid economic embarrassment and physical hardship entailed in having to work to support too many children. Al-Ghazali said to reduce economic embarrassment sustains piety. While the Hanafi school permits coitus interruptus, that means the practice of al-azal, with the wife's consent, while later scholars allowed her consent to be bypassed in bad times. What does bad times mean? It means times of religious decline. And to avoid bad offspring who are lacking piety. The opinion in the Maliki and Hanbali is permission with wife's consent, as it is in the Zaidi Shi'i school. Now, the Imami Shiites prefer to obtain the wife's permission at the time of the marriage contract. So these are various opinions by different schools of laws in Islam. Imam Shawkani adds that among the reasons for al-azal is to protect a suckling child from the dangers of changed milk from a pregnant mother. Another is to avoid getting too many children or avoid getting them as it is. Now, from these opinions, from this brief review of jurisprudence, it is evident that al-azal for temporary prevention of pregnancy is permissible. The Sahaba themselves practiced al-azal at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He came to know about it and did not prohibit them according to Jabir's tradition reported in Sahih Muslim, and while the Quran was being revealed as reported in Sahih Bukhari. Now, thus, prevention of pregnancy is lawful as stated above. So that is the position, general position in Islam. Now, what are the guidelines regulating or guiding family planning services in Islam? It is true that the early scholars of Islamic law did not mention other methods because al-azal was the method known to them at the time and before their time. That is coitus interruptus. That was the only method that was known to them during their time. But by analogous reasoning, that is qiyas, alternative methods of contraception can be allowed as long as the purpose is to prevent pregnancy, Some of these methods may be barriers used by the man or the woman, or medicines prescribed by physicians for temporary contraception. There is no harm in allowing by analogy the modern methods as long as they will not destroy fecundity or the ability to procreate. Actually, the modern methods are better than al-azal because they allow normal and complete marital relations. Now, writings of Muslim jurists make it clear that Islam allows for the use of reversible methods of contraception, including oral contraceptives, condoms, coitus interruptus that we are talking about, emergency contraception, injections, subdermal implants, IUDs, spermicides, and diaphragms. So all these methods are allowed as long as they do not prevent the cause permanent effect on the wife. Now, when looking at the issue of sterilization, other than for pressing health issues, sterilization through surgery or through drugs is not permissible. If it causes permanent loss or fertility, sterilization may be used when it is established that a hereditary disease may pass to children or causes pain. In that case, sterilization becomes mandatory based on the juristic principle of permitting an injury to avoid a greater injury. This is conditional on the disease being incurable and must take into consideration advances in medical technology. So also when we look at the issue of tawakkul, which some scholars put forward as a reason for not practicing family planning, some Muslims question the economic justification for family planning on the grounds that it contradicts the Islamic beliefs of tawakkul. Tawakkul means the principle or the practice of reliance on God and risk the provisions provided by God. But such temporary contraception is no contradiction to reliance on Allah, tawakkul, because it is temporary contraception. And then because the use of these methods is to take expedience while putting trust in Allah, as Muslims always do. The Prophet ﷺ himself was reported to have said, "Humble her and put your trust in Allah." This is how the Prophet ﷺ interpreted tawakkul. And then Imam al-Ghazali, who is an authority on tawakkul, said that al-azal, to escape economic embarrassment, is not unlawful, as to the verse in the Quran which says, "There is no moving creature on earth, but its sustenance is on Allah." This is found in Surah Al-Hud, verse 6. Now, as to the position of Islam in abortion, let's look at abortion. The Hanafi opinion supports abortion provided it is performed within 120 days of conception. That means the first 4 months of conception. The reason is because during this period, the fetus is not believed to be a complete human soul. Early abortion is held to be makruh, that is disliked, but forbidden when it lacks valid reasons or justification. So that means that even at that, it is forbidden when there is no valid reasons. Except when there is valid reasons, they agreed to perform abortion before 120 days. Reported valid reasons included a woman's inability to breastfeed her baby and the family's inability to afford a wet nurse. Some Shafi'i scholars share these Hanafi views. Now, others like Al-Ghazali do not, and made a clear distinction between prevention of conception and abortion, permitting the former and rejecting the latter. That means Imam Al-Ghazali does not allow abortion, but he permits prevention of conception. Now, the Zahiri scholars also and Maliki jurists forbid it under all circumstances. That means they forbid abortion under all circumstances, calling it haram. But some Hanafi jurists allow it before 40 days. However, juristic consensus exists only on the point that abortion after a period of 4 months from the date of conception amounts to taking a life. Yet, this limit may also be set aside if, according to medical opinion, there is a definite risk of death to the mother. The mother's life takes precedence over the child's life on the juristic principle that the root is more valuable than the branch. So also when we look at the issue of predestination, prevention of pregnancy does not tamper with predestination because it does not lie in the power of man to defy Allah's will, whatever means man may use to carry out his intention. This is the reasoning used by the Prophet himself when he was asked about contraception. On the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the Prophet ﷺ said, if Allah wills it to create a soul, no one can stop him. And hence, the Prophet ﷺ saw the Sahaba practicing coitus interruptus, and he did not stop them based on the fact that he believed that if Allah wills it to create a soul, no one can stop him. Now, prevention of pregnancy is neither killing nor an abortion of the fetus, because the semen nutfa at that time from which a fetus is created is not in itself a human being. After the semen mingles with the woman's ovum in the process of fertilization, a fetus is formed, which, as already indicated, will not become an ensouled creature until after 120 days. Prevention of pregnancy is the act of preventing semen of a man from mingling with the ovum of the woman, and this is not killing. What the verse is referred to is the pre-Islamic custom of burying children in fear of poverty, however. Now, the state can help, but there shouldn't be any coercion in the laws. Islam goes to the extent of ensuring that on the question of family size, one parent does not impose his own or her will on the other. So there must be a mutual agreement between the two. Therefore, the question of sanctioning coercive laws which may ignore the needs and circumstances of individuals' families is not acceptable in Islam. The government's role is particularly important in removing economic barriers to family planning by making it available free of charge or at a subsidized price for low-income families who otherwise will not be able to afford it. Governments also can play an important role in removing social and cultural barriers through the educational system and the media. As we have, especially in Africa, a lot of cultural beliefs which create a barrier to the issue of family planning, as we have heard from the presentation of the first speaker. Now, as cultural and religious beliefs can sometimes prevent couples from using health services. Now, as to whether the teachings, the practice of family planning is harmful to the rights of the woman and her well-being or not, I can largely say that it is not harmful to the health or well-being of the woman. It is rather helpful to her well-being and her health. Warding off the risk posed to the health of mothers and children by additional pregnancies is the most common reason for accepting contraception in Islamic jurisprudence. Legal scholars interpret the Quran's recommendation of 2 years of breastfeeding and the Prophet's recommendation against pregnancy during lactation as an endorsement for child spacing, rather than avoiding intercourse for 2 full years, which will be a hardship. Couples can use contraception. Now we have these laws under Quran chapter 46, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ كُرْهًا وَوَضَعَتْهُ كُرْهًا وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ 30 شهرًا. And we have enjoined on man to be dutiful and kind to his parents. His mother bears him with hardship, and she brings forth with hardship, and the bearing of him and the weaning of him is 30 months. So this is the family spacing that the Quran has introduced to the family life. So you can see that child spacing or family planning is not new to Islam, but it is even there in the Quran, because the Quran has stated that the bearing of a child to its weaning can be, in between can be 30 months. And there are also other regulations governing these practices. Now, also, majority of theologians from almost all schools of jurisprudence agree that withdrawal is permissible only with the wife's consent, so that she will not be cheated. In Islam, a wife has the right to both sexual pleasure and reproduction. Some jurists will argue that ejaculation is essential for a woman to have orgasm, and therefore it is necessary to have prior consent from a wife before practicing withdrawal. Legal scholars also who interpret Islam as permitting contraception assume that the method will be safe and practiced only for good reasons. For example, Islam does not allow the use of contraception to avoid female offspring. So this is example of some of the good reasons. This is the position of Islam when it comes to the issue of family planning and abortion, and then also when it comes to the issue of the state coming in to administer the issue of family planning, either to interfere with the issue of family planning or not. So I would like to stop here and listen to the other presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Professor Saidatu. That is really helpful because you have really outlined the traditional teaching from the various schools of law in Islam up to what is in the traditions and also in the Quran itself. Thank you. And you've emphasized that it is within the context of marriage. I don't listen to local radio very much, but this morning I was listening to one FM station in Ghana, and it was talking about teenage pregnancy in Ghana. And the numbers are staggering. The numbers are just staggering. The other day I was listening to something similar from Gambia, and the numbers were just as staggering. So the religious teachings are there, but as we know, what is happening on the street, what is happening on the homes is a completely different matter. And that is why Dr. Rose will talk about safe, qualified hands to provide this care. But we'll come to that. So we turn over to our brother, Kevin. Amos Kevin Annan is a Church of Pentecost elder in Ghana here. He's an elder who's licensed, is also a licensed youth minister, and also a certified life coach and healthy home advocate. Between 2004 and 2020, he served as a deputy youth director of the Church of Pentecost in Ghana. Additionally, Elder Kevin Annan worked as a counselor at the Pentecost University in Ghana between 2006 and 2020. Elder Kevin is also a regular panel member of a radio program, a very popular radio program in Ghana here on family life. And he has worked with young people for the past 3 decades, dealing with the topic of family planning and abortion, both within the context of marriage and outside the context of marriage. So Kevin, we have put you with 2 very powerful women. I wish you the best of luck. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I have listened keenly and closely to the 2 affable and very articulate ladies who have presented on the subject from 2 very important perspectives. My brief that was given to me was to come as a practitioner, since these have given us the scholarly aspect of the matter. As has been said already, being a Christian, of course, I would represent the Christian faith, but I do not speak for any Christian grouping in this country, including my denomination, because the denomination has its official spokesperson, and matters of this nature are sensitive, as Brother John, you rightly said. So I want to say greetings to all of you, and thank you, wonderful Mama Rose and Professor Liman, for these very insightful presentations that you have made this day. I want to share some thoughts also coming from the Christian perspective. Now, you've been told already that I work with young people for quite some time, and in this part of our country, I happen to be one of the persons who have spent the longest moment with youngsters. Myself and my wife, Evelyn, put together events and activities with the aim of empowering young people and spouses. And we have noticed a number of things over the years. And I'm hoping that the thoughts I'm going to be sharing with you will be helpful for this dialogue and aftermath policy decisions and directions that will be taking. Now, being a Christian, I am guided by certain very important edicts. Now, as a Christian caregiver, I have encountered young people who come to me and tell me, for instance, that they're pregnant and their parents are asking them to opt for abortion. Now they sit in front of me and ask me to make a proposition on the matter. But as a counselor and a life coach, I do not make decisions for people. I rather guide in decision making. Now that guidance is supposed to be redemptive and not destructive. So as a Christian caregiver, everything I do must fulfill the scripture in the Psalm 67 and verse 2. And in fact, it's some of the things that inform many a Christian worldview. So that your ways may be known on earth and your salvation among all nations. That is the overarching mission of every intervention that I have offered over the years. Now, the model of my caregiving is also anchored on 1 John chapter 2 and verse 6. If we claim to have fellowship with him here referring to Jesus Christ, and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. So as a Christian caregiver, it is also my model, the template from which I operate. And many of my colleagues who are into the same interventions for young people and for married and would-be couples also operate from the same worldview. Now, our mandate emanates from the same which our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, through the prophetic word of Isaiah the prophet in Isaiah chapter 61, verse 1 and 2, and then also repeated by Jesus himself in Luke, as accounted for by Luke in chapter 4, verse 18 and 19. He says, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and opening of prisons to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. And it goes on and on and on and on. Now, so my mandate as a Christian caregiver is also hinged on this very important sacred commitment of restorative intervention, ensuring that people are able to make a commitment to the Lord and to follow same. Now, the persons that I have interacted with over the years, because I've spoken in virtually every denomination in this country, and by virtue of the fact that I'm on radio and television also offers me a greater privilege to interact with persons who are not necessarily in my denomination. So I've had youth, I've had singles, I've had married persons sit with me, be they Catholics, Protestants, Pentecostals, charismatics, or persons, even those who are non-Christians. I've had Hindus coming to my office for conversations on matters such as these that you're having. And even though I'm Christian, I am very open to hearing where they're coming from, what their concerns are as human beings. And I operate from that world view. And many of my colleagues who are with me are also operating from the same point of view. Now, there are a number of questions that I've had to deal with. Now, be they by young persons, adolescents. I have 2 adolescent daughters myself. And so the issues are also things that I'm concerned about as a parent. And as Brother John was talking about some report that he had heard on radio, we 2 weeks ago on our radio show discussed teen pregnancies and its impact on adolescents in our country. And we got a lot of feedback. People are asking that we should repeat the conversation. Now, I've had to deal with, first and foremost, the issue of is sex for procreation or for recreation? I'm having a lot of issues around that, and I'm having to explain and guide people in that area. Now, I've had to respond to invitations to questions on who determines the size of my family. You'll be amazed. I was in a northern part of Uganda a place called Koboko. And it's interesting that Doc is coming from Uganda. I used to work for a Swedish organization, and we had a camp project intervening in Koboko. And at that time, I had only one daughter. And you'd be amazed, somebody quizzed me, how many children do you have? And I said, I had one. And said, hey, if you die and you carry all your children to eternity, you'll be whipped by the angels. And I burst into laughter, because when you look at this fellow who was talking to me, he had close to about 8 children. And these are malnourished children. At the time that we were intervening, we were doing food rations and stuff like that to keep their body and soul together. Now, I've had to answer the question of which options must I pursue, a natural intervention or an artificial intervention. Then I've had to address the subject of when does life begin? And it's a question that it's on the mind of many religious persons, including myself. Then also I've had to respond to the question, is there hope for me? So one of the things we're doing right now is this event, which we're taking regionally in this country, but this is really targeted at couples. And as Prof. Liman mentioned, for those of us within the faith community, these conversations are usually around marriage and persons who are married, but there's also the issue of adolescents. So I've had people who are quizzing me on these matters, and I have had to engage in conversations around, is sex for procreation or is it for recreation? And one of the favorite scriptures that is often quoted is this one. Now, it says, behold, and this is from Psalm 127, verse 3 and 4. And I've had to address and explain this scripture to people who are married. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is like a reward. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. So here, it's about numbers. It's about who has them in large numbers, and we are considered to be blessed. And this has become a challenge for many that I've had a conversation with. Now, in the determination of the size of a family, even with my 2 daughters, people ask me consistently, when are you having the next one? But I've had to always explain to them, I'm satisfied as a father of 2 daughters. In fact, they were asking when the boy is coming. And that puts a lot of pressure. Even think of it that for me, in my position as one who is considered, quote unquote, as well informed on these matters, is still coming under some barrage of attacks and pressure. Now, and when it comes to the determination of the size of the family, there are many scriptures, but one which stands out very poignantly in many of my conversations is Genesis 1:28. And it says, and God blessed them, and the God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living creature that moves on the earth. So the whole idea, and this is not new, the whole idea that you've got to populate the earth. It is not your duty to truncate population growth and spat. Now, so you find people who are latching onto this, and I have had the duty consistently to engage spouses on this matter, and also even for young people. Now, moving from there, so then comes the whole issue of which of them must I pursue, a natural or artificial? And those of you on the platform, you better understand these matters than many of our people who are within the rural community. A large constituency of the persons I'm dealing with are the middle upper class. These are in urban and cosmopolitan cities. And so that is my catchment area predominantly. Now, the question of where does life begin and at what point? Often the reference are many, but there are 2 that stands out. The first one is Jeremiah 1, verse 4 and 5. And I've just quoted part of it, which says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Now, this creates a very strong position for many who say and contest that the life of an individual is determined by blood, and therefore it's not about size. Now, I've had to talk to them. I've had to have discussions on this. And then the second one is Luke chapter 1, verse 41 to 43, which is about when Mary met Elizabeth, her cousin. And it says, when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb. And Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy." So there's the contention around that. When it comes to pregnancy and all that, it is not about the size. It's about the fact that there is a life emerging. Now, as one who serves the Lord Jesus Christ and seeks to represent him in the facet of life where I function, this becomes my cardinal anchor. As I follow Jesus, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, the whole idea of reaching out to people with grace and yet speaking the truth are my methodology. And so in that context, what do? I become a burden bearer for many of these young people. And the story of the young girl whose story I mentioned earlier, this girl was only about to turn 18, and the mother had proposed abortion, but she was not comfortable with it. She was displeased and was determined to keep the child, but the mother was discomforted by it. Many had talked her into that proposition, and she declined. She opted to have a child. Unfortunately, the child developed some complications with constipation, and I think after about 3 months, the child passed away. But the interesting thing is this, that this young lady at that time now has become a fully matured woman who is married with 3 children and has migrated out of Ghana, living in Australia as I speak, with a husband. Now, on one occasion, she visited Ghana, and we're having a conversation over a meal, and she said to me, "You know, there's something that I thank you for," and that was when I came to you for discussion, that I was confronted with a prenuptial pregnancy. And you didn't push me, you didn't drive me away, but you received me. And indeed, I was the first to have offered her a set of diapers for the baby because the baby is innocent. You know, church discipline came her way and all that, but I was still there to provide her support. And for me, that's a very important aspect of my Christian duty, to show grace to persons who are in such a difficult condition. And we need to call more of the church leadership into this kind of intervention. Today, you know what she said? She says, "I'm innocent of the blood of a child that I gave birth to." So the issue of guilt weighs people down, and people oscillate between, fun and guilt. And that is where I believe that my work really spans, when I have the opportunity to be a burden bearer to these young ones and even married people. Now, there are also persons who are hit with hopelessness. Now, I have a duty, again, to provide them hope. Now, and I do that through my talk sessions. I do that through my counseling sessions. I do that through visitations and exposing them to literature that ignite hope, especially for those who are guilt-laden and are under the yoke of a lot of depression. And so I offer them hope. And this is what Dr. was talking about. Dr. Clark was raising the issue of post-abortion care. I mean, a lot of the times I've seen young people, some who are bleeding, and they've received all their attention medically, but they are still laden with guilt, and there's no psycho-emotional support for them. And that is where I also come in and I provide them hope. I know of a lady who had a child also young, and there was a proposition for her to abort, and she resisted it. She brought forth her child, unfortunately, many years down the line, she's been married and she's dealing with the issue of childlessness. She's struggling to have a new child, and over 18 years now, she doesn't have a child. And she takes consolation in the fact that the child that she had, when her mother asked her to deliver, she would take care of the child and then go back to school. And she went back to school. And though now married woman, she's struggling to have a child. So there is a need for us to also provide help for persons who are helpless. I sit with spouses who are at sea, because they're struggling to take decisions about child spacing, childbirth, and what to do. And my duty as a Christian caregiver is to help those who are helpless, especially when it comes to decisions. But whenever they take a decision, it is their decision, not my decision thrusted upon them. And I hesitate to give them my opinion on matters, because it is not my opinion that matters. At the end of the day, when they leave my office, they are going to live it out and must own the decision. So any cloud of uncertainty, if there are alternatives to it, the high risk consequences that come with it, all those kinds of things are discussed comprehensively. And it is their responsibility now to take a decision which they know they will own up to. Now, not just that, I also provide further and future support for these persons, where I refer them to maybe a clinician, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, for further attention where there's the need for such services. And in some cases, you'll be amazed, somebody will come to you and say, I think I need deliverance. And no matter what you would say, no matter what you would talk to them about, they would say, unless I have that, I will not feel healed. And so to provide them the catharsis they need, I would then propose that, okay, speak to such a priest or a pastor or somebody, go for, confession, depending on their faith and where they subscribe to and serve their Savior. Now, I don't know, but these are the things that we have done, and I'll be glad to respond to any queries or questions that you may have. I posted, let me just say this in closing, I posted the flyer on my Facebook, and some of my colleagues came to me and said, are you going to talk about abortion? Are you sure you want to talk about it? Are you going to push this evil agenda? And I said, no. I have been asked to share what I do and what I've done over the period. And so we have what we call Singles in 3D in Ghana, which helps young people who are singles in the area of dating. I've actually published 2 books on the concept of dating and how to guide young people to build healthy relationships that will not predispose them to trouble. And then we also run the Creative Couples Conclave, which also seeks to provide care and support and attention to persons who are married, who are making such very difficult decisions and choices. I want to thank you most sincerely for the opportunity offered me by your platform to share these thoughts. And I hope that I have contributed somewhat to the discussion. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Elder Amos, thank you so much. That is so helpful.
Thank you.
I have 3 children, and I have been accused of not populating the earth enough. So you are not alone. You are not alone. We want to thank our speakers for the wonderful presentations and expositions. This is a time for us to take questions and comments. I was nervous for Brahamos because we've pitted him with 2 strong women, but he has proven to be the blessed art thou amongst women. Blessed art thou amongst women indeed. So, questions and answers. Father Alex, you have your hand up. If you want to shoot away your question.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very, very much. I'm so excited about the presentations. Very, very excited from the perspective of the Islamic world, and then from the perspective of the medical, and then that of the church. Very, very grateful for this insightful presentation. I have 2 questions. Number 1, during the presentation of our prof from the Islamic point of view. He made mention of when, or actually when the fetus is about to be formed, the things that normally happen. And then he was talking about when the semen met that of the woman and then the zygote is formed and other stuff. And he said that before that, the child is not actually, the blood has not actually go through the process of becoming a baby. And for that matter, killing has not happened, even that particular blood is aborted or something of that nature happened. Theory of ensoulment, that 1-2 months, about 60 days, actually there's no human being formed. The blood is still going through the process, and then no human being can be recognized. But looking from the perspective of the church, like what Elder just explained to us concerning Jeremiah's aspect, that before I formed you, I know you. So it means that even before those semen, the 46 chromosomes coming together to form, that person has already been known and ticked by our creator, Allah or God. So before that formation, there is still a human being in the mind of God that these people are going to have it. It is there. Now, when you look at the medical perspective, somebody may also go through the same by 1 or 2, and then they will tell you that there's a problem with this pregnancy and you cannot contain it. Now, my question is, in the sight of human rights retaining there, how then do you stand on a point as a state to plan your family? Because now people are telling you that I decide what I want to, the number of children I want to have, and I decide how I want to have it, and I want to decide the space in which I need to have it. If you are explaining to the ordinary person who have not gotten this idea or this knowledge from these three perspectives, how do you explain to them about 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, until some of these things happened?
When I was discussing the issue of the semen meeting the zygote or things like that, I was talking about the differences of opinion between the legal schools in Islam. And I've mentioned that there are some that believe that as long as the fetus did not reach 120 days, then it has no soul yet, therefore it can be aborted. And then also some believe in lesser period of time. But I've also mentioned that bearing in mind that this abortion cannot be for any flimsy reason. So what I mean by that is that except if there is medical complications. So for the single fact that a lady is pregnant outside wedlock and she wants to abort the child, you can see that there are school of laws that do not even believe in abortion, whether it has reaches one week, 2 weeks, or whatever. They do not believe in abortion completely. So provided a lady is pregnant, she must deliver that pregnancy, except if there is medical complication to warrant her aborting that. And that means except when the medical people just justify that, yes, the abortion is necessary. Now, as to the issue of how do you decide how many children you want to have and the rest, I've mentioned some Quranic verses which state that between the delivering of a child and the weaning and the rest is 30 days. That means in Islam, a person has about 2 years of natural or permitted child spacing. And then due to some reasons now, a person can also decide to increase this, but the issue is that there can never be a permanent blockage. No matter what, a person can space his family for at least 2 to 3 years, and then he can continue to deliver and space again and deliver. Naturally, the woman has a natural, after some years, she will stop naturally by herself. So therefore, if you observe this family planning, when we are looking at menopause at 35, 40, or at most 45 to 50, when a woman got married at the age of 20, 25, then you can see that spacing for 3 years, 4 years, she will have about 4 to 5 or 6 children at most. So she won't have the number of children that our parents have had, about 11, 12, 15, some even 20. So you can see that naturally she has spaced her birth, and then naturally it has given them the room to prepare for their children much more than when they are having too much children to bear. So these are some of the regulations of Islam considering the issue of family planning, spacing, and abortion. Okay, so it does. A person has no right to sit down and say that I'm going to have 5. No, you can only space the children and leave the rest to God to give you either 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 10, or whatever. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liman. That's what my brother told me some time ago. God will take care of the children. And I told him, yes, when next you have to pay the school fees, call God, don't call me.
Don't tell him, we'll be there for him.
Dr. Rose, please, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think from the medical perspective, as I mentioned in my presentation, laws exist that guide what healthcare providers can and cannot do. And I think these exist in almost every country. So in Uganda, in terms of abortion, the government allows that to happen within hospitals if there's been sexual assault, incest, rape, and when the pregnancy endangers the mother's life or the mother's mental and physical capability. There is a great deal of conversations on family planning and contraceptive use to space children. I must say that, you know, as I mentioned, there's always that conflict. Am I a healthcare provider? Am I a Christian? Am I both? And what perspective am I going to honor as a provider? We know that when mothers are not able to space children, they run a danger of, you know, they themselves having no capacity, no reserve to be able to carry the next pregnancy to term. So I would say that as a medical provider, you know, the advice that we are going to give to a mother who within 1 month, for example, conceives a child, you know, so therefore she is pregnant while taking care of a newly delivered baby and having to breastfeed and care for that child, and that process of no spacing endangers both the mother and the child's life. So from a medical perspective, we are probably going to advise that, you know, spacing needs to occur. I have to say something quite controversial here, knowing very well that we have a lot of Christians and persons of the Islamic faith on the call. But from the medical perspective, abortion happens, unwanted pregnancies occur regardless of anybody's faith background, regardless of their religious background. Those two things occur in every single country to a degree that it is one of our biggest crises of our time, and we need to be able to look at it. It doesn't matter from what perspective, we have to acknowledge that these things are occurring and we need interventions. The other thing that I'm going to say is that existing religious tools and legal frameworks have been inadequate in addressing this crisis. So regardless of what faith background and all the uncomfortable things we feel about these issues and how they violate the biblical perspective over the Islamic perspective and all those instruments within our faith background, we have to recognize that in the context of a world that is broken, this is a big crisis for which none of these instruments are working ably. Therefore, that's why in my recommendations for dialogue, we need an integrated approach. For healthcare providers, religious leaders need to come as a part of an extended healthcare system so that we can integrate some of those values into what eventually happens and what narratives and conversations we have as healthcare providers when we encounter a woman, a girl, and a man in need in these crises. So, Father, I do acknowledge that, these are really sensitive issues, but as a healthcare provider, I'm in a position where I'm looking at an escalating crisis for which neither the healthcare system nor the religious groups are providing a sound solution. And it is time for us to have that candid conversation, however painful and however uncomfortable it may be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well said. This is why we are having the conversation here. So having uncomfortable conversations, I'm going to throw an uncomfortable question to Brother Amos. He has dodged the question in his presentation, but the question is following him. Somebody asked, I wish to know if Christian couples are permitted under any circumstances to commit abortion. If yes, under what circumstances? If no, why not? Brother Amos, please.
Well, I mean, I would, when you sit with a couple who are faced with such a dilemma, you've got to have a conversation with them on their position on the matter, the implications of a decision made on them as persons, and whether or not there are remedial interventions available for those implications. Because other than that, you're going to open a Pandora's box that will create a bigger problem for the society. Now, there are situations where the pregnancy was unanticipated. Now, the question would be, would they be able to hold on to the pregnancy and offer the child for adoption? I have been to many homes of care because the Swedish organization I was working for practically was supporting children in care. And we had persons who would go and adopt some of these children and take them as their own and raise them as their own children. So it's important that from where I sit, as a talk therapist, I would have to have a conversation. I do not make prescriptions to people on such matters, and I will still stay away from making prescriptions. But I, in that situation, would not opt for an abortion. And the thing is, if I would opt for it, I will not prescribe it to another. It's just like the Hippocratic Oath. The original state of the Hippocratic Oath said that I will not give anybody anything that will induce the death of another. I mean, it's part of it. So that was the foundation of it. Now it's been modified over the years in many, many, many generations of medical practice. So that is what I would say to this question. Thank you, Brother John. But I want to also tell Doc Rose that her question was not controversial. I mean, she put a caveat that she was going to make a controversial statement. I think that it was an invitation, a passionate invitation for deeper conversations that will not come with preconditioned mindsets, and then people should be open and not be intolerant towards persons of faith. Because within the NGO circle, for instance, I have been to meetings where there's so much hawkish approach to you if you're a person of faith. And it's as if you are not welcome. And yet you are called upon to come and make some conversational opportunities happen. So that's what I would say. Thank you very much for that those two important questions you raised. And I would be reflecting on them for further conversations beyond this place.
Thank you. Thank you. And I guess the point that Dr. Rose was making is that if you, as religious people, we tend to just say this is what the teaching is, this is what the Bible says, this is what Islam says, this is what the Quran says, and we leave it there. But she is saying that, look, despite all of this teaching, in practice, in real life, it is happening. People are dealing with facing these questions. So how can we handle those questions beyond what the official teachings of our religions are stating? I guess that's the question. And this is what someone is asking. The question is that if it happens that a pregnancy for whatever reason, and the husband does not want the pregnancy aborted, who has the final say?
Okay.
I think the Prof wants.
Yeah, she's back. She's on. Okay.
Yes, yeah. I think that question was posed to me.
Yes.
By Patricia Apene.
Yes.
Now, and then she's asking for the Islamic perspective of that. Now, in Islam, we know that just like in any other religion, we know that there is leadership in the family, and the leadership of the family is to the man first. But then we also said that the decision to take family planning belongs to both the two couples. Now, in case the wife is pregnant and she feels that there is a compelling reason, that is medical reason, to abort that baby, maybe she has been advised in the hospital or something like that, and the husband is not ready to comply with that advice, then I think there are other means that she can follow, because whenever there is argument or crisis in the family, we know that we have other means of resolving those crises. This has become a crisis now in the family. Now, she can invite their elders, maybe in form of their parents or whatever, so that they can discuss this issue with them, or alternatively, if they don't have that, or if that fails, then she can even go to the state or to court or whatever, so that the decisions can be taken in this case. Because if it is really a compelling medical ground, then it has to be looked upon. And then just like I said, the life of the mother is much more better, more important than the life of the unborn baby, because the mother has some other roles to play, and she has some other children to take care of, while the unborn baby is not yet born. So to sacrifice the life of the mother on behalf of the life of the child, I think Islam prefers the life of the mother, so that she can take care of these other responsibilities. So even though the husband is the leader, but he is only allowed to lead on mutual ground, not on the basis of a dictator leadership, kind of leadership, or something like that. Let me also chip in something about the first discussant, what she said. Bear with me for not able to call her name. Now, I think there is a kind of Ross. I think there is a kind of synergy, or there should be a kind of synergy between the medical practitioners and the religious leaders, either in the church or in Islam, bearing in mind the fact that what the religions are after is saving life, and then how to take care of that life, both medically and in terms of other ethical virtues, moral virtues too. So they can work hand in hand, and I think they have been working hand in hand. Now, in the first place, the Muslims are binded by their religious beliefs, the Christians are binded by their religious beliefs. But just as we have had there are so many people that get pregnant due to one reason or the other, either among the couples or among the single mothers. Now, how do we, does that mean that we should throw them away of the, send them out of our society or ignore them? No, we are not going to turn our back on them. We have to take good care of them. We have to take good care of them. And that is where the medical personnel will come in, because they have to be given the necessary medical care, just as any other couples were given those medical care. They are also human beings. They have the right, all the necessary human beings or human laws rights that is enjoyed by other human beings. So therefore, they will be also taken care of accordingly. So that is where now the religious people and the medical practitioners will have to join their hands together in order to avoid abortion, either among the singles or among the couples. And whenever abortion occurs, then how do we take care of such people when abortion occurs? And among the couples, like we had the Reverend Father said, sometimes there is a mistake, and then pregnancy will occur. So what do we do? So in this case, we still have to take care of them, either medically and or from the necessary moral ground. So I think already both the medical and the religious people are working hand in hand to see that we take care of this issue of family planning and abortion. But the only thing is that we still have to put our efforts, more efforts on seeing that the issue of abortion is really relegated to safe abortions. We don't just administer abortion simply because a girl is pregnant and she wants to abort it. Because just as the father has said, even having number of children is a blessing. And that is also the same in Islam. Increasing the population, but in any religion. And I believe it's also the same from the medical perspective. So I believe I have said something that has addressed this issue.
A quick word, Brother
Thank
John,
you.
on the collaboration bit. I think that I also add my voice to the collaborative efforts to be put in place. I mean, recently in Ghana, there was a story that broke out, which had to do with midwives and doctors who are professionals conspiring to sell babies.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed. I mean, we were called upon as moral society to speak to these issues. And people were asking, where are the churches? Where are the Muslim leaders? Where are the traditional practitioners? So it means that there is a role that moral society can play. And so let us create the atmosphere, such as what you have here, for engagement.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Dr. Rose cited some legal prescriptions from the Ugandan context.
Yeah.
And you find that all across Africa,
Yeah.
and also in other jurisdictions. And I think a lot of these legal prescriptions are mostly based on scientific knowledge and scientific data. And the religious people are not always invited in to be part of those kinds of conversations. Mm-hmm. And I think the call of Dr. Nanyonga is in the right direction, that if the politicians and the policymakers want this to really work, they really have to work with the religious leaders, because as you rightly said, a lot of power and influence is exerted by the religious leaders on African society, and we cannot run away from that. So I'm glad that there is a consensus around kind of having more of a dialogue between the scientific community, the medical community, and also the religious communities. We have a question from Prince Ayim Brown. Please, if you can unmute and make your question snappy and direct, and ask a real question.
Okay, thank you. My question is to Elder Amos Kelvin Annan. Either as a counselor, when you encounter a couple where they have a child or they have children, and the other partner, either the husband or the wife, want the couple to have another, or maybe have a couple, but because of situation and other things, maybe work, education, and other responsibilities, the other side is refusing to have another. How do you as a couple navigate through this, where the other side want a couple, maybe one or two, but the other side feel, okay, we have one or two, so it's okay. So I prefer maybe we using a contraceptive, or we using a condom, or maybe practicing the withdrawal. How do you approach something like this? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your
Thank
question.
you.
I'm happy you said that they are a couple. They are a couple simply means that they should learn to dialogue. They should learn to build consensus. They should bring their thoughts to a point of convergence without one trying to dictate their desires over the other. Oftentimes what you find is that persons want to appeal to the other in a way that is almost like totalitarian control over the other person, as though their inputs were invalidated. And for me, that is an uncivil behavior that is exhibited in marriages. So I will have a conversation with them, try to understand everybody's objections or propositions to the desire to have more children. Now, when you have done that, you will then be able to know what is becoming the inhibitive factor for the other party to collaborate. And mind you, when it comes to conception, it lies really in the power of the woman to so do. It doesn't matter how hard a man desires a child. If a woman says you can't have the child, there's no way you would get a child, because they know their cycle, they understand their times and seasons. So there's a need for you as a man to understand that dialoguing with your spouse on this matter is crucial. At the end of the day, she bears the child in the womb as well over the period of conception. And maybe she's going to be stressed out, she's going to have some challenges, even can be constrained at work. So there's a need for you as a man to also be considerate in your desire to have more children in this regard. And there's always a way out. We, at our couples retreat, averagely we've had like 30 couples each year. It's been running for 7 years now, and we've had such cases as well. And so you would then give support to these persons, even beyond the event itself, just to ensure that there is accountability and there is support coming forth to those persons.
Thank you, Brahimos. And there are two questions here that I think have already been addressed. One has to do with defects. If the fetus has got some defects or some kind of medical conditions that are deemed to be fatal for the unborn, I think, or maybe not fatal, but such that the couple or the medical community deems necessary to abort. I think that has been addressed. Even Islam permits that, Professor Liman has stated. And also on the consensus between the religious community and the health practitioners and the medical community, I think we've also stressed that. So I guess the issue has to do with, in Brian Amos's presentation, he talked about guilt and shame.
Yeah.
The family want the abortion to happen because of shame.
Mm-hmm.
This is what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the mother, the one carrying the fetus, also is struggling with a sense of guilt. If this happens, how can I live with this going forward? So you have this tension between shame, the culture of shame, and the sense of guilt that is at work here. But also you have somebody made the point, I think Madam Faustina made the point, men making decisions on these issues of how long, who should keep, which child should be kept, and there can be no abortion and those kinds of things. When men have never been pregnant for 1 month, they don't know what they're talking about. And so it's easy for men to spontaneously lead with this discussion and to have someone like Brother Amos to contribute, so that women who are really in the forefront of this can really speak to the issues. And Brother Amos is right. If the woman says no, you can go to hell and heaven and come back. It's no, it won't happen. So if you want to go and get pregnant and you cannot get pregnant as a man, what do? So I think that we need to really have these discussions. And I think Madam Faustina is still has a question. And Auntie Faustina, please, can you make your question snappy? That will be the last question and we wrap up.
All I'm saying is that where does all this stem from? Whether rape or so, we need to have.
Thank you very much.
Serious sex education. The churches, I know, I speak for the Islamic group, but I know churches don't talk much about sex. It's like a taboo in the church. So young people grow up not knowing anything. I had a meeting with youth in my church, and I was telling them about pre-sex and how it wasn't good. And they said, how would I know? Complete lack of understanding. Because we are not using the word of God seriously these days. We are allowing our children to be on social media and looking at foreign material and all that. So we should stem it from the roots.
Thank you.
To prevent the pregnancies in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. I think, again, I couldn't agree more. Religious leaders, religious teachers, if we really don't want abortion, and we don't want family planning, we should talk about sex education. It is very important. But when this happens, immediately there's a pregnancy in play, it becomes a medical issue. Mama Faustina is right. Prevention is always the best thing. And our teachings and advocacy and education is essential in this area.
Well, Uncle John.
Premarital sex and all of that. But yes.
Well, I think that I mean, thankfully, I was giving training by Planned Parenthood, but my subscription to the tenets of educating young people on matters of sex and sexuality is deeply scriptural, because the point is that a lot of misinformation is also going out there.
Yeah.
There is also a lot of propaganda, which is also out there. So there's a need for us to raise people who can decipher between what is the truth and what is an orchestration to push us down the cliff.
Yeah.
Because basically it's risk reduction, risk elimination. Those are the two alternatives for young people. Now, when a young person chooses to walk the path of risk elimination, they are called names. They are told that it doesn't work. So I heard that at age 10, I took a chastity and a virgin's pledge. I married at 30 and I was a virgin. It doesn't make me better than anybody. But the thing is that there is also a critical remnant out there who need to be empowered to be positive peer models for their own generation.
Yeah.
Now, when people make statements such as the church is not comfortable talking about sex, anybody who has known me, if you go to my social media handles, I speak more to youth meetings and youth congregations on matters of sex and relationships. And I've done that for three decades and 1 year. I've trained a lot of young men and women in this area because I have the tools on behavior change communication skills. And I make that available not only to young people, but also to parents, because we seem to push everything to the moral society. But more than anything, we need to empower the parents. A lot of work which is going on right now is actually disempowering parents. And it's undermining the essence of parents in the lives of young people. Now, so if we really want to do it well, I think that we should not neglect parents in these kinds of conversations. They need
Absolutely.
behavior change, communication skills. They need the tools, because some of them are raising 3, 4 children. And if you go and empower only one, what have you done? You haven't done anything. What happens to the remaining 4?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got work to do as partners, and nobody's effort should be discussed and derided as not efficacious, because you can raise questions about everything, including the scientific community, because the scientific community itself is divided on the various interventions that are being proposed, depending on who funds what. They tell you to say what you want to say. I've been to conferences where people have money for me to come and push a certain agenda in my country. And I say, no, my conscience does not allow me. So between shame and guilt, I think that we need to help people to develop conscionable choices. Because guilt and shame would be with us as long as they are poor and rich. But how can we help people to say that I'm going to be a person of conscience? Like Theodore Roosevelt once remarked, to educate a person in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace for society. So if we don't want our society to come under a menacing attack, then we need the balance of the two. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amos. That is so helpful, a note on which we can draw our conversation to a close. This has been clearly a topic of interest. We are going to revisit it at some point, and we want to thank our speakers, Mama Rose, as I affectionately call her, Dr. Nanyonga from Uganda, and Professor Liman, Saidatu Liman from Nigeria, and our brother, our own Kevin Amos here in Ghana. I thank you all for the wonderful presentations, and thank you participants for showing up. Next month, our topic is actually also another interesting one: the church, the state in a multi-party democracy. And the month after that, it will be the mosque, the state in a multi-party democracy. To what extent can churches be involved in multi-party politics, in partisan politics, and to what extent can they be involved? We are having 2 eminent speakers to address that. And the month after, we are going to have the Muslims discuss that also from the Islamic perspective. So once again, thank you all. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, your days, your mornings, wherever you have joined us from.